Why do you give everything and receive nothing in return? Why does your endless availability make you invisible to the very person you're trying to please? Why do you pour your heart, your time, your energy into someone who treats you like you're replaceable? What if I told you that your generosity isn't kindness at all, but a form of self-destruction disguised as love? Right, I will change my mindset now in the comments if you're ready to understand why giving everything away is the fastest way to lose everything that matters. Let me tell you something that will shatter your understanding of relationships. The moment you become completely available to someone, you become completely invisible to them. The moment you give them everything they want, you become nothing they need. This isn't cruelty. This isn't some cosmic joke. This is the fundamental architecture of human psychology, and you've been violating its most basic principles. You see, consciousness operates on a principle of contrast. We notice things that stand out, that resist, that maintain their own shape against the pressure of conformity. When you dissolve yourself into someone else's desires, when you become a mirror reflecting only their wants and needs, you cease to exist as a distinct entity. You become background noise in their life, as forgettable as the air they breathe. Time is the most precious resource any human being possesses, and how you allocate your time reveals your deepest beliefs about your own worth. When you give your time freely, without discrimination, without boundaries, you're broadcasting a message that your time has no value. And if your time has no value, then by extension you have no value. The person you're trying to impress receives this message loud and clear, even if they never consciously acknowledge it. Reality doesn't care about your intentions. Reality responds to your actions. When you act like someone who has no standards, no boundaries, no sense of self-worth, reality treats you accordingly. The universe is a mirror, and it reflects back to you exactly what you project into it. If you project desperation, you'll receive indifference. If you project neediness, you'll receive dismissal. If you project worthlessness, you'll receive exactly the treatment you believe you deserve. Think about the people you value most in your life. Are they the ones who agree with everything you say? Are they the ones who are always available whenever you need them? Are they the ones who sacrifice their own needs to meet yours? Or are they the ones who challenge you, who maintain their own opinions, who have their own lives and priorities that don't revolve around you? The truth is uncomfortable but undeniable. We value what we have to work for. We appreciate what we cannot easily obtain. We desire what maintains its own integrity in the face of our demands. This isn't because we're inherently selfish or cruel. It's because value is created through scarcity, through selectivity, through the tension between desire and resistance. Your problem isn't that you're too generous. Your problem is that you've confused generosity with self-abandonment. You've confused love with self-sacrifice. You've confused caring for someone with erasing yourself for them. True generosity comes from abundance, from a place of strength. What you're doing comes from scarcity, from a place of desperate need for validation. When you give everything away, you're not giving from love, you're giving from fear. You're afraid that if you don't meet every need, fulfill every desire, satisfy every demand, you'll be abandoned. But here's the cruel irony. Your fear of abandonment is creating the very abandonment you're trying to avoid. By making yourself indispensable, you've made yourself invisible. Let me tell you about an ancient king who ruled a vast empire. This king had everything a man could desire: wealth, power, the respect of his subjects, and the love of his people. But there was one thing he wanted more than anything else: the love of a woman who lived in a distant kingdom, renowned for her beauty and wisdom. The king sent her gifts every day: golden jewelry, rare silks, precious stones, exotic foods. He wrote her letters professing his love, his devotion, his willingness to give her anything she desired. He made it clear that she need only ask, and he would move mountains to fulfill her wishes. The woman received these gifts with polite acknowledgement, but no genuine interest. The king's letters went unanswered. His declarations of love were met with indifference. The more he gave, the less she seemed to care. The more available he made himself, the more distant she became. Confused and heartbroken, the king consulted his wisest advisor, an old man who had served the royal family for decades. The advisor listened to the king's laments and then asked a simple question: "Your Majesty, what do you value most in this world?" The king thought for a moment and replied, "The things I have had to fight for, the battles I have won through struggle and sacrifice, the achievements that cost me blood and sweat and tears." The advisor nodded. "And what do you think of the things that are simply given to you without effort?" The king's face darkened with understanding. "I barely notice them. They hold no significance. They require no thought or appreciation." "Exactly," said the advisor. "You have been giving this woman everything she could want, but you have given her nothing to value. You have made yourself as common as the air she breathes. And who values the air until it becomes scarce? The king understood. He immediately stopped sending gifts. He stopped writing letters. He stopped making himself available at her every whim. For months, he focused on his kingdom, his duties, his own growth and development. He became mysterious, unavailable, focused on purposes greater than winning her affection. Slowly, something changed. The woman began to wonder about the king who had suddenly disappeared from her life. She found herself thinking about him, curious about what he was doing, why he was no longer pursuing her. The gifts she had barely noticed were now conspicuous in their absence. The attention she had taken for granted was now something she found herself missing. Eventually, she sent a letter to the king, asking why he had stopped writing. The king waited a week before responding with a brief, polite note explaining that he had been focused on important matters of state. She wrote again, and again he took his time responding. Each exchange became more precious because it was rare, more meaningful because it was selective. Within a year, the woman had traveled to the king's kingdom, drawn by the mystery of a man who had shown her that his life was rich and full even without her in it. She had come to value him precisely because he had stopped making himself worthless in her eyes. She had learned to appreciate him because he had forced her to earn his attention. They married, and their love was deep and lasting because it was built on mutual respect and genuine value, not on the desperate need for validation that had characterized the king's earlier approach. This story illustrates a fundamental truth about human psychology. We cannot love what we do not respect, and we cannot respect what has no boundaries, no standards, no sense of its own worth. When you give everything away, you're not demonstrating love. You're demonstrating a lack of self-respect so profound that it makes others uncomfortable. The woman in your life doesn't value you because you've made yourself worthless, not intentionally, not maliciously, but through your own actions. You've taught her that your time has no value by giving it away freely. You've taught her that your attention has no worth by making it constantly available. You've taught her that your affection has no significance by offering it without discrimination. But here's what you must understand. Value is not inherent. Value is created through scarcity, through selectivity, through the tension between supply and demand. When you make yourself infinitely available, you create infinite supply with limited demand. The natural result is that your price drops to zero. This doesn't mean you should become cold or manipulative. It doesn't mean you should play games or withhold affection out of spite. It means you should have standards. It means you should have boundaries. It means you should have a life that exists independently of your desire to please one person. The most attractive quality a person can possess is not availability but selectivity. Not neediness but self-sufficiency. Not desperation but contentment with or without the other person's approval. When you are complete in yourself, when you have your own goals and purposes and sources of fulfillment, you become someone worth pursuing rather than someone who pursues. Think about the people in your life who command respect and admiration. They're not the ones who are always available, always agreeable, always sacrificing their own needs for others. They're the ones who have clear boundaries, who stand for something, who have their own lives and priorities that don't revolve around seeking approval from others. These people are valuable because they are selective. They choose carefully how to spend their time, who to invest their energy in, what causes to support. Their yes means something because they're also capable of saying no. Their attention is precious because it's not given to everyone who asks for it. But you've been operating from the opposite paradigm. You've been saying yes to everything, available for everyone, giving your attention to anyone who asks for it. You've been acting like someone who has nothing better to do than wait for scraps of acknowledgement from someone who has learned to take you for granted. The king in our story learned that love cannot be bought with gifts or earned through self-sacrifice. Love is attracted to strength, to independence, to someone who adds value to your life rather than subtracting from it. When you make yourself small, when you erase your own needs and desires, you don't become more lovable. You become less interesting. This is why the most successful relationships are between two people who are complete in themselves. They choose to be together not because they need each other, but because they enhance each other's lives. They bring something to the table rather than just taking from it. They maintain their own identity and interests while also building something together. But you've been bringing nothing to the table except your willingness to serve. You've been offering nothing except your availability. You've been providing nothing except your agreement with everything she wants. And then you wonder why she doesn't value you, why she doesn't appreciate your sacrifices, why she treats you like you're replaceable. The uncomfortable truth is that you are replaceable, as long as you continue to make yourself replaceable. As long as you have no standards, no boundaries, no sense of your own worth, you can be replaced by anyone else willing to be equally self-sacrificing. But the moment you start valuing yourself, the moment you start being selective about how you spend your time and energy, you become irreplaceable. Value yourself, and others will value you. Respect yourself, and others will respect you. Have standards for how you want to be treated, and others will meet those standards or remove themselves from your life. But continue to act like someone who has no value, and the world will treat you accordingly. The king learned that scarcity creates value. When he stopped flooding the woman with attention and gifts, when he made his time and energy something that had to be earned rather than something that was freely given, he created the conditions for genuine appreciation to develop. But scarcity without substance is just manipulation. The king didn't just become unavailable. He became unavailable because he was genuinely busy with important work.
He didn't just stop giving gifts, he redirected his energy toward building something meaningful. He didn't just ignore the woman, he focused on becoming a better version of himself. This is the crucial distinction. True value comes from having something valuable to offer, not from artificially restricting access to something worthless. You must become someone worth pursuing, not just someone who is hard to pursue. You must develop your own interests, your own goals, your own sources of fulfillment that don't depend on one person's approval. The woman began to value the king, not because he was playing hard to get, but because he genuinely was hard to get. He was building an empire, developing his character, pursuing purposes greater than winning her affection. He had become someone whose attention was genuinely valuable, because he was using it to accomplish valuable things. This is what you must do. You must stop making your entire life about pleasing one person, and start making your life about becoming the kind of person who deserves to be valued. You must develop your own interests, pursue your own goals, build your own sources of fulfillment and meaning. When you have your own life, your own purposes, your own sources of joy and satisfaction, you naturally become more selective about how you spend your time. You can't give everything away because you have important things to do. You can't be available all the time because you have commitments to yourself and your own growth. But this isn't about becoming selfish or uncaring. It's about becoming someone who has something valuable to offer because they value themselves. It's about becoming someone who can give from abundance rather than neediness, from strength rather than weakness, from choice rather than desperation. The King's story teaches us that love is not something you can earn through self-sacrifice. Love is something you attract through self-respect. People are drawn to those who have a strong sense of their own worth, who maintain their own identity and interests, who add value to relationships rather than just taking from them. When you constantly give everything away, you're not being generous, you're being desperate. You're trying to buy love with sacrifice, to earn affection through self-erasure. But love cannot be bought or earned. It can only be attracted by someone who is genuinely worth loving. The woman in your life doesn't value you because you've made it clear that you don't value yourself. You've taught her that your time is worthless by giving it away freely. You've taught her that your attention is meaningless by making it constantly available. You've taught her that your affection is insignificant by offering it without discrimination. But you can change this dynamic. You can start valuing yourself, setting boundaries, being selective about how you spend your time and energy. You can develop your own interests and purposes that don't revolve around seeking her approval. You can become someone who adds value to her life rather than just trying to extract value from it.
This transformation won't happen overnight. The king in our story had to overcome his own desperate need for validation. He had to learn to find fulfillment in his own accomplishments, his own growth, his own purposes. He had to become comfortable with the possibility that the woman might not choose him, and find peace with that possibility. But once he made this shift, once he started valuing himself and his own time, everything changed. The woman began to see him as someone worth pursuing rather than someone who was always pursuing her. She began to value his attention because it was no longer constantly available. She began to respect him because he had learned to respect himself. The same transformation is available to you, but it requires you to stop acting like someone who has no value and start acting like someone who knows their worth. It requires you to have standards, to set boundaries, to be selective about how you invest your time and energy. Start by developing your own interests and goals that have nothing to do with impressing anyone else. Pursue activities that fulfill you, that challenge you, that help you grow as a person. Build a life that you would be proud to live even if you were living it alone. Then start being more selective about how you spend your time. Don't be available every time someone asks for your attention. Don't say yes to every request for your time and energy. Learn to say no to things that don't align with your values and priorities. Set boundaries about how you want to be treated. Don't accept behavior that disrespects your time, your energy, or your worth. If someone consistently treats you like you're not important, stop making them important in your life. This isn't about being mean or playing games. It's about having self-respect. It's about understanding that your time and energy are valuable resources that should be invested wisely, not given away carelessly. The king learned that when you stop chasing, you become worth chasing. When you stop being desperate for someone's approval, you become worthy of their respect. When you stop making yourself worthless, you become valuable. But the most important lesson from the king's story is this: the goal is not to manipulate someone into valuing you. The goal is to actually become someone worth valuing. The goal is to develop such a strong sense of your own worth that you naturally attract people who recognize and appreciate that worth. When you truly value yourself, when you have your own life and purposes and sources of fulfillment, you don't need to convince anyone of your worth. Your worth becomes self-evident. People either recognize it and treat you accordingly, or they don't and remove themselves from your life. Either outcome is acceptable when you have genuine self-worth. You don't need everyone to value you. You just need to value yourself enough to accept only relationships that add value to your life, rather than subtract from it. The woman who doesn't value you now is teaching you something important about yourself. She's showing you that you don't value yourself, that you don't have boundaries, that you're willing to accept treatment that you shouldn't accept. She's holding up a mirror to your own lack of self-respect. But instead of blaming her for not valuing you, thank her for the lesson.
Use this experience to develop the self-respect you've been lacking. Use it to learn to value yourself so that you can attract people who value you in return. The king's story ended with love, but it began with self-respect. He couldn't be loved until he learned to love himself. He couldn't be valued until he learned to value himself. He couldn't command respect until he learned to respect himself. Your story can have the same ending, but it must begin with the same foundation. You must learn to value yourself, to respect yourself, to treat yourself like someone who matters. Only then will others learn to do the same. Clean up your life. Develop your own interests and goals. Set boundaries about how you want to be treated. Stop giving everything away and start investing in yourself. Become someone who is worth pursuing rather than someone who is always pursuing others. The world is waiting for you to recognize your own worth. The people who are meant to be in your life are waiting for you to value yourself enough to attract them. But first, you must stop being someone who gives everything away and start being someone who has something valuable to offer. If you're ready to stop devaluing yourself and start commanding the respect you deserve, write "I will change my mindset now" in the comments. Let this be your declaration that you're done being taken for granted, done giving everything away, done accepting treatment that doesn't match your worth. The time for self-respect is now.